All right. So welcome everyone. This is going to be a great show. So it is Mika, Lisa, and we have a guest. We have a special guest. So the amazing Karla Bale is here with us tonight. And so we are on our third or fourth installment of Mindful Inclusiveness. And tonight we're going to be talking about mindful resilience. And before you start thinking that you know what we're going to talk about, you're wrong. You're wrong. But we are going to take a moment and recognize the fact that it is the month of June. And with the month of June, it is Pride Month. And so we're going to ask Karla Bell to tell us a little bit about Pride Month and also what you can do to be an advocate or an ally or an activist. But Karla, we're going to yield to you to tell us a little bit more.
Oh, well, thank you, and happy to be here to have this discussion tonight, and happy Pride. So, Pride is a wonderful time for our communities. I say our. I identify within the LGBTQ plus communities, and it's a way for us to have time to reflect upon our history and I will use the word resilience in our communities, and we'll have that discussion later, right? And everything that we've been through and everything that we continue to persevere over and with, and also celebrate, our authenticity about our existence in this world that sometimes doesn't want us to exist in various ways. And so pride is a way for us to celebrate ourselves and our communities and our milestones in this world and in this country, and to take a minute and also to reflect upon um, almost I would say almost like an educational realm to our cisgender and heterosexual counterparts, right, in this world that um, they may not necessarily know the battles that we still face, right? And so it's a point for us to celebrate who we are, but it's also a point to say, hey, colleagues, hey, friends, hey, family, this is also what's going on in our world, and it affects everything that we do. It affects everything that you do, whether you know that or not, because um, basically, we're talking about everything from the social determinants of health, the ways that we live, the ways that we work, the ways that we celebrate, the way everything. And so, interestingly, it's 2022, and this country is in a milestone of its own. 2021 and 2022 have been the most historic record of anti-LGBTQ plus legislation in this country, and it's not stopping. There's an onslaught going on, and some of the disparities that our communities face in this country are only exponentially growing. And I just would like to ask my colleagues and my friends and family, um, you know, take a minute and educate yourselves and become more aware about what's going on in our communities. Please take a minute and call your legislator or write them, email them, and say this is not equitable. Like we want to work towards equity, right? And regardless of what you think or whatever, you know, we all should have access to the same things. We all should have the ability to live our lives and and do what we would like to do in, a civilized way, right?
Yeah.
And that is not happening right now in our country. And so I would just love for my colleagues and friends and family to take a minute, educate yourselves, look some things up. Start conversations at the dinner table, start conversations, or interject when you hear somebody saying something that's not nice, right, about our communities, or that's even just wrong, like misinformed, right? And just start those conversations. Those would be huge. And doing some inclusive practices like putting your pronouns right on your Zoom or your emails, or because that sets the stage. That tells us who are looking for that welcoming space that there are welcoming spaces. And that's not easy to come by sometimes. So thank you for letting me have that bit.
Oh my goodness. So as we were in our prep meeting, y'all, Mika and I were telling Karla, we were like, we just kind of roll with it, right? We have a plan, but then wherever the spirit takes us is where we go. So what really spoke to me was this: just take a minute, right? Just take a minute, think about what you can do, think about calling your legislators, thinking about getting informed. And so, Karla, I'm going to ask you to just take a minute and tell some people about the legislation that you think is most important right now for people to be speaking up and talking about. And so, we're probably going to take another 3 to 5 minutes to guide us, inform us, educate us. And we are so grateful for you taking this time to talk with us about this.
No, I appreciate it, and you're right. It's a lot of information to sift through. So some really important points, and to bring it down to layman's terms for folks who don't know how to sift through the various ways that our communities are being attacked in legislation. So there are some themes of legislation that are going out there, and for those of you who are in rehab, um, some of the biggest ones that are pertinent to physical activity, movement, and the wellness, health and wellness, and healthy lifestyles of gender minority communities specifically are all of the anti-trans sports bills that are going on right now. And and what that means, and again, people just need to get educated. And when you start to find yourself coming up with an argument like, oh well, hormones come into it, or they do have an advantage for whatever reason, I really encourage you to look. There's some great scientific literature out there to 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 put you in the right direction to say, you know what, there really is no evidence to say that. There really is no evidence to support any of the arguments out there for this legislation. And what I can tell you is, if you take a step back, like we're talking about being mindful and intentional here, if you take a step back and think about that legislation for a second, you will realize that the people it's hurting it's hurting them so much more than who they say that they're trying to protect. There's no such thing. There's no people that are suffering right now that they're trying to protect. They're making something up. And so again, just be aware of things that you're hearing about legislation, and use your critical thinking skills and say, I wonder what the counterpoint to that argument is. What does the literature say? Um, and so that's one realm. And the other is this theme of trying to protect our children in schools, right? From content related to sexual orientation and gender identity. Again, no evidence. And for however history's been educating kids, they've learned from basically the point when they're born on about heterosexual families. So I'm not sure what we're trying to protect against. Again, it's what it does is perpetuate the disparities that go on in these communities if we don't start talking and normalizing that our families are the same as everybody else's families. And if children don't learn that, then they grow up thinking other, like otherness, right? And we start getting into the otherness categories. And you know what? We all just want to be human and love each other and get along and be civilized and help each other, right? And that's what that's about. So again, it's fear-based, it's religious-based, and it's not humanity-based, and it's not humanness, right? It's not that connection to, wow, I want to be your neighbor. I go back to, Mr. Rogers, like, let me be your neighbor, right? That's what this is about. And right now, we're not feeling like we have a lot of neighbors. Yeah. So those are the two biggest. I mean, there's other legislation out there. And the really scary thing about this legislation too is that they're actually, in some states, they're actually making it a criminal offense for providers to give gender affirmation care. And we're not talking about necessarily surgeries or anything. We're just talking about hormone therapy. But the literature very much says that this care is life-saving for these youth. It is medically necessary for their health and well-being. And their health and well-being go way up when they have access to this kind of care. And there's lots of literature to support that. Just look into the literature, it's there. The Pediatric Society, many professional organizations, medical professional organizations have come out and given much, much voice and many very scientific reasons and facts to the fact that this legislation should never be introduced, never mind passed and implemented. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you so much for just kind of walking us through that. Also, just that reminder to just think about what the counterpoint is, right? And also to look in the literature and make sure that you're not gaslighting yourself. And across the bottom of the screen, we are scrolling, let me be your neighbor. That is all we're asking, right? Not saying you got to convert to how I believe, not saying you got to sharing my faith or sharing my lifestyle behaviors. I'm just saying, just let me be your neighbor, right? That's all I'm asking for. I ain't even asking for a cup of sugar. I'm not asking for an egg. I ain't asking for nothing from your house. Just let me be and let me live my best life. That is all people are asking. And to not create legislation that basically takes away from somebody else's freedom because of your opinion. Because these decisions don't impact anything that goes on in your life. You're just
I don't know. Oh, sorry, Lise.
no, no, you go,
I don't.
Karla.
I don't know if either of you saw uh, last week. I think it was a video that came out from a teen who was graduating high school in Florida, and he was told by his school that he could not mention that he was gay, and he could not talk about it. And so, essentially, in his graduation speech, and he was so brave and so wonderful, and at the same time I was so proud and proud of his bravery, and at the same time I was incredibly sad that we had to talk in code about who we are in 2022, right? um, what kind of lessons are we telling our communities that we have to talk in code about who we are? This is the United States of America, and there are people who are not doing very well because of what's going on. I mean, we already know there's a lot of health and well-being and mental health um, disparities in our communities because of the stigma and discrimination that has gone on already, and it's just exponentially gotten worse in the last 2 years.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And it is fascinating to me that a country that decided to leave its home country because it felt like it was being discriminated against, right? Now, granted, there's a whole nother backside to that story, right? Because all those people had resources to be able to leave, but that's a whole nother conversation. But they left on the very premise of that they wanted to be able to be who they wanted to be. But we've built this whole social structure around and just basically fringing on other people's freedoms and causing people to have to be inauthentic. But he did do a beautiful job talking about his hair. So, yes, it was masterful, but it was unnecessary. It was really unnecessary. So Mika is ready to take us into a centering thought. We finna go even deeper. Some of y'all like, oh my goodness, that's like the first 10 minutes. I know. And we ain't even hit the topic yet. We talked a little bit about resilience, but we finna take y'all into the deep, deep. Finna go into the caves of Mika and Karla, right? These ain't Play-Doh caves. These are Karla and Mika's caves. But we're gonna start off with a centering thought. So Karla and I are gonna leave the screen for a minute, but we'll be back in just a few while Mika gets us ready for our discussion.
Thank you. And so we have talked about some heavy topics. There is a lot going on in the world right now. And so this mindfulness exercise really is just a breathing break. We're going to take 1 minute to give our intention to the weight of the things that are going on. There are massacres that are happening. There are, these legislations that are affecting people's lives. And so just taking this moment, practicing being mindful, being present, but take 1 minute to give your attention to the things that are concerning you. And through your breath, acknowledge it in a non judgmental way. and just give it its due reverence. And as we come to the end of that minute, just the curious question is, can you and will you take a breathing break, take a minute throughout the day, throughout life circumstances, to just take a moment and absorb what's going on around you? So thank you, Dr. Van Hoos.
It would probably help if I unmute myself. But as always, Mika, just thank you so much for just how you lead us into a space of just centering ourselves. And there is a lot going on in the world right now. For those of y'all just joining us, Karla was talking about legislation related to LGBTQ plus communities. We've also talked about, we wanted to celebrate that it is Pride Month. And hey, Alex and Mo, it's good to see y'all. Um, but as you think about like this last month of events, couple of months of events, Mika, I'll start with you. What is sticking out to you the most in regards to where we are at as a society?
Dr. Van Hoos said we were going deep. You just came out the gate. Where are we as a society? We going into these caves, Karla.
Came out the gate, and I'm finna tell y'all because I got to give a shout out. Hello, Ahmad. So Ahmad is our friend over in Qatar. Hello. I don't even know what time it is, Ahmad, but hello, my friend. It's good to see you. And so we are having a global conversation about the state of society. Mika, I'm gonna be quiet and yield to you now.
I need the question again. What is going on? The state of the world. There is a lot of hurt. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of acting out. There's a lot of rebellion. There is not enough love and appreciation and respect and just acknowledging humanity. And I think that is what we want to bring to this conversation about mindful inclusiveness of, you know what, we're global, right? We're from all over the place. We're from different parts of the country in the US. We're from different lived experiences within our family makeups and all of those things. And being able to see the common humanity that we share outside of what our beliefs are, to still be respectful and have a respect for life and people having the choice to do and make the decisions that they make, but to be able to do that in a safe way, so that we can coexist, and moving into a space of understanding and being able to grow together, even if you originally have a difference or a differing of opinion. Let's have this conversation. Let's be able to talk. Let's open up our space so that it's welcoming. So then we can get to know that neighbor. We didn't want the sugar at first, but once we get to know them, we will ask. we might need something, and we will be comfortable to ask them for something.
And so, Karla, that was great segue into a question for you in regards to why do you think we're having such a hard time being each other's neighbor? I mean, what do you think is at the root of it?
Whoa. So, um, I mean, that's so deep, and it's so multi-layered and multifactorial. But honestly, we are now in a place where I think society is more reactionary than it ever has been. Um, and we've also, again, it's always from the inception of time been about power, right? And power struggle. But basically, between being reactionary, being very selfish. So we, especially in the United States, are, and I'm making generalizations here, obviously, but we're a me society. And so we don't think of the bigger picture, right? So to be my neighbor and for me to be your neighbor, I need to think beyond myself and what's good for me and what my goals are and how I'm going to accomplish my goals. What I'm not thinking about is when I do that, who's, who am I stepping on? Who am I stepping over? Who am I pushing down? Who am I not helping? We're not doing any of that as a society. And I just, I think that's one of the big root problems. Um, and then I don't know if I'm opening up a can of worms here, but I have,
Open
I
it.
have to,
Open it.
I do have to say that there is some brainwashing and there is a lack of critical thinking. And so we have these polarities in society now that regardless of putting facts in front of them, they will absolutely refuse to believe the facts. And where do you go from there? I mean, where do you even come to the table and try to have an open discussion and go, I didn't really get that about your perspective. Can I share mine? Well, no, because you're wrong. Well, where do we go from there? um, and so that's my can of worms.
That is so true. That is,
Right?
yeah.
That was so true. And like Mo and Alex are in the comment going, that sounds accurate to us. There's like, yep, we in agreement with that, Karla. So that is why Karla got the say that twice loud banner, right? So that comes from our friend Kitty Bunny, who she's like, sometimes she's like, look, you need to say that twice loud, real slow, so that the people hear it and understand it. So we was like, thank you for opening that can of worms, Karla. And that's gonna allow us to pivot to our conversation, our topic of this month. So for those of you that have been following along, there is a community of practice. Basically, it is a group of us that are trying to be mindful, inclusive humans, practitioners. And one of the topics that we are just finishing up is mindful resilience. And we were having this conversation about what resilience means in our society, and there's a risk right now that for many of these families, many of us that have been touched by some of the tragedies that have happened within the last month, also, even with some of the legislation that's going through our state and our national bodies, for someone to say, oh, it'll be okay, just toughen up, right? Just toughen up. There's this expectation that you should just grieve for a little while and then pop right back. And we started talking about that, about, is that really what we want? And is that healthy, the way in which we're defining resilience and how we're communicating it, and that there's almost a judgment piece to it as well? And so, Karla, I'm going to yield the floor to you, because I'm going to tell y'all that during our community of practice, Karla was like dropping bombs. We were all like, tell us more. What else is she gonna tell us? It was so good, y'all. Karla like taught a master class. We should have wrote her a check that night, but we're gonna yield to you, Karla. What are your thoughts on the term resilience and how we are operationalizing it in society? And what do you see the risks being with the way that we're doing it?
Yeah, great question, and humbled by your compliments about our discussions. I honestly, resilience is about your ability to persevere through some trauma or difficulty or challenge or whatever, and bounce back, right? And so which is a great thing. I think when you contextualize it, it's really, really a really good thing in a number of situations, right? So, as we grow and develop in life, right, we have to learn that there are things that are hard in life and we need to figure out how to get through them and be better for it, right? And then there are things that people applaud us for being resilient with that are not ours to be resilient through. We didn't ask for them. We didn't ask to have to work on these damn challenges and persevere through and survive. They're just there. And that resilience is the problem, right? So what communities and what populations are we asking for their entire lives to continue to be resilient without focusing on the reason they're having to be resilient? And I just, that is, I think, the core problem with resiliency and how we've been marketing this and studying resiliency, right? And I actually really appreciate one of the in my field, one of the researchers who studies resilience in LGBTQ plus older adults is Frederickson Goldson, and she comes from the social work world. And I really appreciate their lens on the resiliency of our communities through the life course of people who are older adults now and what they've lived through as a community and as an individual in society being LGBTQ plus. And through that lens, I think resiliency is a great thing to talk about because the literature, what she's putting out there is sort of what I'm saying, right? Is here's a community that has had to be resilient or we would be extinct, right? Like basically, I mean, let's talk about Black and brown communities, same thing, right? Like we're talking about the communities that inevitably are the only ones that have to be resilient. We have to build resiliency in these communities. Well, are you serious? Like, let me teach you about resiliency. I don't think you even know what the word means. um, so I don't know if did I start a path for us to go?
Oh my goodness. I was like, let me in, Karla. Yes, because you opened it up. Because, like, for those of us that are academicians, right? So, those of us who work in academics, higher education, even if you want to include, let's just say, education in general, right? So, pre K all the way to whenever you decide to get out of school, there's this conversation about, oh, we need to build resilient students. But I'm like, most of the children I work with are resilient already. The fact that they walked through the door and was prepared to learn or even just showed up. I'm like, do you have any idea of what their environmental context is or what their social context is? I'm like, them babies are already resilient. So I'm like, how dare you say, oh, we got to work on them. They're not resilient enough. I'm just, so there's this way in which we're defining resilience that does not take into account one's lived experience to show up in a space, right? Where we're trying to label it based on something that the dominant cultures are trying to define as the right type of resilience. And so, yeah, Karla, I was like, stay back, Lisa, right? Stay back. So my judge right now, y'all, is I'm trying to keep my head right here because when Karla started talking, you see me do this, and then my forehead gets cut off because I'm like, "Ooh, let me in, Karla." But I was there. I was there for it. Mika, what's your thoughts?
Finger snaps. Yes, Karla's dropping mics. And just, to what you said, Lisa, when it becomes this expectation or you're trying to cultivate more, making it the end result, like it is a process. Like to be resilient, you go through this process and you show what is within you. It's based on how your community has supported you, because that is a factor of resilience, of where the support is. How can you uplift and encourage and help people through the obstacles that they encounter? And so I don't like it when it's, you have to be resilient. And then the conversation around resilience, when we don't acknowledge the toxicity and the harm that the system is causing that makes resilience have to be what we're banking on. Let's not address the system. Let's not make changes in how this is operating or how people are interacting or how people are putting an unrealistic demand, but we want you to have to be resilient. But no, we're not going to change the system. We're not going to address the toxic behaviors. So I think that's where I have an issue with the word. But just knowing that, like you said, Karla, there are, like, it's a beautiful thing when it's not expected, when there's not a demand on it. It's like this. Let's, in reflection, yes, this is what got you through.
So I was sitting here, I was playing with words, right? Because I was like, are we having to be resilient because of resilient systems? Right. And so what I mean by that is this concept that the word resilient, when you look at the etymology of it, means to spring back to an original
Mm-hmm.
state. And so we're asking people to be resilient because we have systems that refuse to adapt and change, right? Because resilience to me should not have to be the goal for the individual. We should be able to have environments that shift to us, right? We
Mm-hmm.
always talk about, adaptive learning and being an adaptive person, but we don't talk about the need for our systems and structures to adapt to contexts and times. I mean, like, the world has changed, but we're holding on to some things that need to be let go. I'm like, break that rubber band. Can we just stop snapping back to the way
And
things
that part,
Yes.
do we want the system to be resilient, or do we need it to go back to its original state? Probably not.
Well, and don't you think, don't both of you think that this is the easy way to go about it, though, and focus on the resiliency of the individual at the
Oh
individual
yeah,
level instead instead of, I
because
mean,
you
we
have
all
no blame in it. You're like, oh, it was them. They
we
weren't resilient. They couldn't.
we always hear, culture change takes, I don't know, 7 to 9, I don't know what that is, but basically, you know, you're making an excuse for not changing the system. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, systems and structures, they do what they were designed for. And in a moment of, projection, like, let's just take the attention off of us and the system, and oh, look at you. Or you have to do this more. And then, sometimes you're chasing, it's like a hamster on a wheel. You're perpetually trying to attain or achieve this resilience when actually you've been resilient the whole time. Like Lisa said, you show up.
Yeah. So, one of the things that's in the comments right now is this quote that says that if you are silent about your pain, they will say that you enjoyed it. And they will try to say that it was consensual. I'm just going to throw that in there. But Lori brought up a great question that says that she was talking about the fact that are we contorting individuals? Contorting individuals. It would be Lori Ray to give me a big word that I can't pronounce. Or crack the system for all. What's your thoughts on that?
Crack the system.
Nigga said, give me some crack. Just crack the system.
No, I'm coming with this hammer.
Yep,
We
absolutely.
busting foundations over here.
So, like, when y'all think about that, like, what are some ways in which systems could assess themselves and crack change the way in which they do things? What are your thoughts on that?
Wow. I mean, for me, the first thing my head goes to is we have to address the power at the top, right? And the power at the top needs to have buy-in, right? There needs to be accountability for that power at the top, because when you have that power dynamic, anybody below who really wants things to change still needs to go through the top. And so, I mean, don't get me wrong. In my communities, we've revolted, we've had riots, and yes, those work in certain circumstances. But when we're talking about this kind of a thing, and we're talking about changing systemic inequities, one piece at a time, we still need to address the accountability at the top, in my opinion. And I
That's a
don't
great
ask me
point.
how to do that, because I don't know that I have I don't
That's a
have an answer
great
to that.
point.
So I'm gonna give a shout out to our OT colleagues, occupational therapy, um, occupational therapist assistants. But there's an OT named, I think her name is Mish, or she goes by Mish. And I was in a conference and she said this, y'all, and I could have just sat at her feet. She said the only reason why we have to have accountability is because you or an organization was not responsible. So you did not address your responsibility. So now we have to have accountability. And I said, wow. I mean, I was just like, that sums it up right there, right? But I love what Karla was talking about how for that accountability, we either as members of a community or as a population, a society, we have to be active to let people know that we are engaged and here's what we want and this is what we're expecting from you. But then we also have to have people that are in roles that then can make policy change. um, because ultimately we have to have policies that change so that then the next generation hopefully won't have to deal with this as much. Now, we've already learned some powerful lessons from American politics that sometimes we come back to stuff that we thought 50 years ago we had. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Don't make, I ain't even gotta say it out loud, right? But we coming back to it because we ain't got nothing else to deal with. But you want to talk about my uterus? I ain't even got a uterus anymore, and I'm upset about this. I gave my uterus away voluntarily, but anyway, I'm just like, it just doesn't make sense. Mika's looking at me like, Lord Jesus Christ, help us out. But it's just this concept of like we're deciding what resilience looks like in certain people. And like there's even a resilience conversation in the Roe versus Wade debate because some people are thinking, well, if you get pregnant, that that maybe having an abortion is the easy way out and these women just need to make different decisions and they need to have consequences related to their decision. I'm like, you don't know anyone's lived journey or why they're making the decisions that they're making about their body. But it's this I don't know, it's almost like you're colonizing my lived experience by telling me if I'm resilient or not, or if I get to make a choice. I'm sorry, I told y'all we was going into the caves, but that was my moment of rambling. So, Mika, what you over there thinking about? I see you smiling and grinning. Where you at, Mika?
We just love it when you go deep. So I'm just taking it all in, short of leaning all the way to the camera.
So,
And
Now,
Lori Ray,
thank you for bringing that word colonization in, right? Um, yes, exactly. And again, it's back to who defines resilience, right? Who is who's defining? So I get a compliment. Wow, you have great resilience because of what you've gone through. What does that mean? Do
yes.
you know? Do you even know what I went through? Like, I don't think you do. Yeah.
And it's like it's a oh, how do I want to say this? I think it's well intentioned, but it's just such a misstep where you're just like, where they're like, oh my God, I'm so amazed that you've done this and this and this as a Black person. I'm like, the bigger issue is why did I have to do all this as a Black person, right? Because I could have
the
done some extra stuff
system.
if you wouldn't have gave me them extra steps and barriers and all that other stuff that wasted my time and energy. I'm like, you excited about this, man. I'm sitting back here thinking what else I could have accomplished if I didn't have to jump through hoops and apply for a loan 15 times just because of the color of my skin or the zip code I live in. So Lori Ray we're gonna have Lori Ray on the show. She says, I have seen well-intentioned leaders reinforce the norm by protecting their folks from investing too much work and effort into activities with poor outcomes. She is spot on. and waste and resources. And thank you, Mo. Um, Mo and Alex are on talking about how that it's not designed for you to get close to the glass ceiling. I think that's part of it as well, right? Where I think there definitely is a conversation about how sometimes those of us from dominant cultures, subconsciously, unconsciously, even consciously, we create barriers so that we can keep that hierarchy in society.
Maintain the status quo.
Yes. So we gotta leave the people with the solution.
Karla, you got 3 takeaways for the people?
So we got to be solution oriented. So I'm gonna give y'all a moment to think. So for me, I would like for us to think about when we talk about resilience. I would first like us to assess our systems and structures to say, okay, what is going on in the system or in the structure that is requiring that person to be resilient? And then number two, maybe figuring out a way for resilience to be more of a verb instead of a noun. I know some of y'all like, no, Lisa, that can't happen, but it can because language is about agreement. So if two people agree with me, then it happens. But could we talk about resilience as more of a process, like Mika was talking about, instead of it being a destination? Because one of the books I was reading, Present Over Perfect, the young lady talks about that there's no there, right? You keep talking about where you're headed to, but she's like, then you get there and you're going somewhere else. So there's no there. So my first thing would be to focus on systems and structures and what's causing that person to be air quote resilient. Number two, resilience being more of a process. And then number three, and this one's so simple and I'm trying to practice myself, is mind your own business. So, what I am working on for the month of June is minding my own business. In my value system, there is God's business, there is your business, there's my business. Your business is your business. Anything in the future, anything that I feel like I'm not well informed on is probably God's business. And then the stuff that pertains to me is my business. And I'm just going to not interfere with your life. Now, I will collaborate with you to make the world a better place, but I'm not going to get in your way. So, those would be my 3 solutions. All right, Mika, Karla, who ready?
I'm going to yield to Karla.
Oh, that's nice. How do I follow Lisa? Well, I mean, for me, so I take this into my educator role in life too, and I think one solution is for the educators, in all of us, right? Is is when we find ourselves, making judgments or talking to students, or learn our learners, right? Um, I want us to be cautious about how we're making those judgments in terms of how our students are adapting to situations, right? And so I think, and I'm just talking from the physical therapy educational world, but in all educational worlds, there are these expectations, and never shall we stray from those tunnel expectations, right? Of how you should do the journey. And I want to challenge us to say, you know, getting through the journey looks very different for all of the learners, right? And so when you get comfortable in your zone and go, I'm the expert in this, listen to what I have to say, and you'll be successful. I want to challenge those people and say, no, you are not the expert. That person, the learner, is the expert. And you need to work with them and get to know them to collaborate in their learning for their success, right? And so that's just one solution, sort of. I mean, um, I I liked. I don't know that I have 3. Mika, I think we should go back and forth. Actually,
we're tag teaming.
Yeah, we're
So I'm
tag
going to
teaming.
take a different approach.
So I'm gonna give
Go
y'all.
ahead.
I wanna highlight this comment from Lori Ray, which Karla, as you were talking, I was like, Lori and Karla are in the same vein, but for those of you who can see it, it's basically Lori Ray saying that it's almost a pat on your head for suffering at the hands of the system, right? And in the
And
Black
she said that's
community,
supposed to be an angry emoji.
oh yes, angry emoji, angry emoji. Um, and in the Black community, that's called the happy slave phenomenon, right? That you know that you're in the system that is disadvantaging, even harming, traumatizing you, but you're supposed to be happy, right? And that the system passed you on the head for the fact that you still keep showing up for the foolishness. So thank you so much, Lori Ray, for that comment. All right, Mika, we're tag teaming, so you're up.
So I'm taking a different approach on these takeaways because we talked about, how do we navigate the system in relation to resilience. But I think, in a conversation about resilience, it speaks to the individual of what is some of the things that you might need to consider if you're like, I'm really struggling and I'm not in a place where I'm even feeling like I'm getting through life circumstances. And so I think some takeaways for your own personal resilience, because it is a good thing to have to be able to be the person that you want to be. So it starts with your intention of who you are, having moments of gratitude around what is happening, but there's still something in some spaces to be appreciative of. And we may or may not talk about that in a mindfulness exercise soon. And then really leaning into your community of support, because that is what then also helps you to kind of get through. So for those of you, when you see someone that you would say like they have really shown resilience through their process, if you speak with them and you get to know them, you'll more than likely will know that there was a community around them. There was some support, if it's your family that you're born with or the family that you make for yourself, but just really finding that support. And I know that you referenced our community of practice, but I think in growing and in moving through different systems, it's very helpful.
Okay, so Mika or
I have
Carla?
one more.
Oh
I have
shucks,
one more.
come on,
I do have
Carla.
one more. All
Mic
right.
drop.
So, mic drop. So it's Pride Month, right? So I'm going to talk about resilience in the LGBTQ plus communities and populations, and but I'm going to talk it from a solution oriented way. So instead of focusing on the communities and the negativity of what's going on, I want to focus on our power to help create the environment that our communities need to focus on what they're doing instead of having all this stuff going on in their heads about, oh my God, where am I going to I might get kicked out of my house. I might, so instead of doing that, let's talk about what we can do for them. Inclusive practices. What does that mean? So again, either as educators or as colleagues, family members, whatever, that means regardless of how uncomfortable you're feeling with whatever's going on with that person in front of you, maybe they just came out to you. Maybe you don't understand it. Maybe whatever, hold space for them and let them speak. Hold space for them and let them tell you how they're feeling. Use the name if they have a chosen name that they would like to be used. I mean, there's literature to say, you know how many suicides you prevent just by using the proper pronouns and chosen name. So again, by doing that, that is a solution to helping the resilience of our communities, right? And even pulling back on the need for them to be as resilient as they have to be, right? So we're talking about all of that. Yeah.
Yes, so Carla was giving us some insight on being that ally, that advocate, that accomplice that needs to be in all spaces for all people. So thank you for that. Thank you for joining us, Carla.
Yes. So as we get ready to move into what we have come to call Mika Magic, I'm just gonna highlight a few of the comments. So as you if you're jumping on, some of the things that we were talking about today was mindful resilience and this concept of how we're using this term resilience in regards to how quickly can you bounce back from something. And we pushed back on that. We were like, is that even really necessary? Is that should we be focused on the endpoint of resilience, or is resilience really your process of addressing, whatever is going on in your life? And so that was one thing that we talked about, and Lori Ray kind of summed it up beautifully, right? Are we in this business of trying to contort, change individuals, or should we just crack the system, right? Is part of the issue with resilience is because the system keeps bouncing back to what it was when it really needs to be adapting and adjusting. And then Alex and Mo podcast brought up this really beautiful point about that we often put off this message that if we're silent about our pain, then people might think that we enjoyed it, or maybe that it didn't bother us as much as it really did. And so that's one thing to be thinking about as well. And then the last comment that really kind of spoke to all of us was that this concept that it's almost like you get a pat on your head for your suffering. And the more you suffer, the greater and the happier that the system um, talks about you and celebrates you. And I will say, as a person that is Black, as a PT, I really felt this one, because I often feel like in the PT community, people are like, oh, yeah, we know we do all these things, but thank you so much for your service and for what you do. And right. And every time you show up, they're like, oh, just thank you, thank you, thank you. And we know it's hard. Well, if you know it's hard, then fix it. I'm just like, that to me is a no brainer. If you know it's hard and every time I show up, you got to acknowledge that and thank me for it, how about we just get together and fix it? How about we just do that? So that was one that really jumped out to me from Lori Ray. And so as we get ready to close up, oh, Lori Ray got another good one. She says, as rehab professionals, oh, I got to ask y'all this question. Contend with disability and resilience? How is it a trophy or a scar from the system with that population? Is that what that spells? I don't have my glasses on. But Mika and Karla, I'm going to ask y'all to answer Lori Ray's question. I'm telling you.
I think it's all, it goes back to the system of dominance and what the expectations are for what we quote unquote make the norm. And so any marginalized, historically excluded group of individual having to deal with a system that wasn't designed for its thriving, that it's flourishing, um, we're having to maybe band-aid or support individuals in ways that we could just go really address the system, and then it would be that true inclusion, that universal design that would be there to support everyone. So I think as rehab professionals, like, our job is to help. Sometimes we help with adjusting how our patients interact with different systems from a disability standpoint. But if we say, oh, instead of adding a ramp to these stairs, like, let's just tear the stairs down and just a ramp for everybody at any point. So those kinds of things. So yeah, we definitely deal with it for sure.
Oh, that was good, Mika. And then we celebrate people when we see someone with a physical disability that, yeah, they're making their way up the stairs, but the amount of effort that they're having to get used to get up those stairs when we could have just made a ramp, right? It really, to me, when we're having these conversations about disadvantaged, marginalized, minoritized, historically excluded communities, it's all the same thing. We're asking
Yeah.
people to spend extra energy on stuff that's unnecessary. And I am the mother of four and the grandmother of six. And what I tell my children is, I'm like, don't entertain people for free. But I feel like we've created these systems that are causing you to entertain people so that they can watch your struggle. It makes them feel better about themselves. And then they pat you on the head and go, oh, that was so good how you got up them steps. Dude, I ain't even need to get up them steps. Just build a ramp. Just
Put
build
Yeah,
a
that
and
in
I
the banner. Don't entertain people
yeah,
for free.
And I don't think I have much else to add to Lisa and Mika's, but for me it's the lens of, again, putting the accountability on the majority or the societal norm, whatever that is, to say, it is your responsibility to figure out how to bring these people into belonging, right? And so what does that mean? What does belonging mean, right? Not inclusion as well, but really belonging. That person actually feels like they belong in that space that you're bringing them into. And that means you have considered their needs and you do things differently so everybody is able to get to the table the same at the same time, right? So yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that had to become a ticker right there. That right there, that's your responsibility. If you wondering what your responsibility is as a human, your responsibility is how do you bring people into belonging? What is within your sphere of influence and impact that you can create a circle of belonging for other people? And it really is like what Yoda said, right? You either doing it or you're not doing it. Don't be trying because ain't no trying. How do you bring people into belonging? That is your responsibility. That's all we asking you to do. Keep it simple. So, as always, the great Karla Bell, just mic drop. Just mic drop, Karla Bell. So, thank you so much for jumping on with us. We told you we are here for the foolishness and for the conversation. Um, Although the course that we're all in is focused on mindful inclusiveness, it really is just being authentic and modeling environments where we can say what our truth is and listening to each other and finding ways to make this universe a little better place, and building environments that are inclusive and that have the spirit of belonging. So, Karla, we thank you for how you lead. I'm not going to tell you thank you for your resilience based on your intersectionality, because what I'm gonna tell you is how do we crack some stuff and burn some stuff down so you ain't got to be resilient. So yeah, yeah,
But we see you and we see all the amazing things that you do, and you are an awesome human.
yes, you
Well,
are.
thank you. I'm in the company of greatness. Thank you. Ditto.
So, but we are ready for our last section of Mika Magic for the evening, and so Mika, you are up.
All right. So thank you for that great discussion. Thank you, Karla, for joining us. Thank you all for joining us and tuning in. We are going to take a moment and express some gratitude, appreciation for the little things, sometimes the things that we lose sight of. And so for this mindfulness exercise, it's about appreciation, expressing gratitude for those little things in life, the day to day gifts that often go unnoticed. So as you get comfortable where you are, take a nice deep breath, inhale and exhale. And for each inhale and exhale, go a little bit deeper, a little bit slower, and observe your breath in a way to bring to your mind a state of focus. And you can feel where you're sitting, feel the support around you, ground yourself where you are, and think about the room where you're in, how it feels to be here, what room you may be in the dwelling where you are. And then take notice of the little things that are around you. Maybe you took for granted your computer or your phone or your earbuds. Have you appreciated the shelter and the safe space that your room has provided to you? Are there any sounds that are present in the room from a device that has given you great support? A fan to keep you cool, or a clock to keep you on task and on time? And sometimes those sounds can become a distraction or they can become an annoyance, but give appreciation to them and their presence in your space. And think of each sound as an opportunity to kind of explore your surrounding, to be more mindful of all the moving parts that exist where you are. And as you take a deep breath, do you notice any smells? Can you notice any subtle aromas? And as you breathe and explore, appreciate this moment of mindfulness. And then begin to extend your awareness outside of your immediate surroundings. And you can think about the entire home, not just the room or the space where you are. But bring to mind the things that you use every day to help make your life run more smoothly. Your maybe your coffee maker, your teapot, your sinks, your closet, your clothes, the different things that you utilize throughout a day that you probably didn't really give much attention to. You just keep moving forward. And take some time to just express gratitude for these things, these modern conveniences that make your life easier. And don't dwell on the things that you don't have, but really be appreciative of what you have. And as we come to the end of this mindfulness exercise, bring your awareness back to your breath. Take a deep breath in and a long, slow exhale. Bring your awareness to your breathing, bring your awareness to your body. This is your life. This is who you are. This is where you are. And so, as you continue to take moments to appreciate the little things that you may have previously taken for granted, but experience it with a beginner's mind or eye and gratitude. And my curious question for you is, what have you taken for granted around you that you now have seen it in a different way? So, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Mika. And thank you, everyone who joined in with the conversation today. Um, we're just so thankful for this community of learning and practice. And we look forward to growing with each of you. And we look forward to being your neighbor. And we will commit to our responsibility of creating circles of belonging. And later on, we'll ask you for sugar. But right now, we just asking to be your neighbor. Have a good evening, everyone.
All right. Bye.